He's now said it won't happen until after the US midterm elections on November 6th, saying that he just can't leave right now. We'll explore what this means for the situation on the Korean Peninsula later in the show. But first, let's get the latest headlines with Devin Whiting at Arirang's News Center. Devin?
Hi, Jang-ho. South Korea and the United States as allies will continue on their journey to peace. That's what President Moon said today in remarks read out on his behalf by the Minister of Patriots and Veterans Affairs, Pyu Jin. The address was delivered at a commemoration ceremony for the Battle of Changjin in the Korean War, in which the president said UN forces distinguished themselves as heroes. The president thanked those service members for their sacrifices as they fought to save people, mostly refugees, in that battle 68 years ago, which he said paved the way to peace on the Korean Peninsula today. He also said that their sacrifices will have been worthwhile if the upcoming second summit between North Korea and the U.S. results in complete denuclearization. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has invited the Pope to North Korea, and South Korean President Moon Jae-in will formally deliver that message to the Pope next week when he goes to the Vatican. Shin Se-min reports.
President Moon Jae-in, set to depart on a five-nation trip to Europe this weekend, will also make a stop at the Vatican for a meeting with Pope Francis. The top office says the president will be conveying a message from his North Korean counterpart on possibly inviting the Pope to Pyongyang.
President Moon will relay a message of invitation to Pope Francis from the North Korean leader that he will passionately welcome the Pope should he visit the capital Pyongyang.
And such an invitation from the North dates back to the Inter-Korean summit in the North Korean capital last month. President Moon reportedly made the proposal to Kim Jong-un on meeting with Pope Francis, who has consistently shown a strong interest in establishing peace in the region. The presidential office also disclosed an encounter between one of the South Korean delegation to Pyongyang summit, Archbishop His Highness Kim Hee-jung, and the leader Kim. The visiting archbishop reportedly told the North Korean leader that he would relay to the Vatican that the two Koreas are working in the direction of reconciliation and peace, to which Kim Jong-un responded by asking him to send the message. If the Pope does accept the invitation, it would be the first time that the head of the Roman Catholic Church has ever visited the North. Perhaps on a mission to help North Korea make connections with the world while bringing peace to the Korean Peninsula, President Moon will be sitting down with Pope Francis at the Vatican during his stay there from October 17th to 18th. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
South Korea is hosting the 2018 International Fleet Review. The Navy has organized a number of events through Sunday, including the main fleet review on Thursday, which will showcase dozens of warships from 12 different countries. KangKyung-wha has more.
With several maritime patrol aircrafts and helicopters leading the way, more than a dozen warships in a line formation sail towards the flagship. The South Korean Navy held a final rehearsal before the main event of this year's International Fleet Review, which is set to take place on Thursday off the southern coast of Jeju Island. After the warships and submarines passed by the flagship, the South Korean Navy's underwater demolition team showed off their maritime infiltration skills by jumping from an aircraft at a high altitude into the operation area in the sea.
As the main driving force of the nation's maritime power, the South Korean Navy will support peace and prosperity on the Korean Peninsula and keep sailing until our country becomes one of the world's strongest maritime powers.
Taking place for the third time in South Korea, the 2018 International Fleet Review features the largest number of participating foreign naval forces, with representatives from 46 countries coming to Jeju Island. Most of the events are open to the public at the Jeju Civilian Military Complex port through Sunday. As well as showing the South Korean Navy's firepower, this year's International Fleet Review will highlight the nation's strong ties with its allies. KangKyung-wha, Arirang News, Jeju.
The National Assembly has begun its annual audit of the government. Over the next 20 days, more than 750 government ministries and agencies will be up for inspection. One of the most high-profile audits is of the Foreign Ministry amid the reconciliatory mood on the Korean Peninsula. Opposition lawmakers argued that not enough progress is being made towards denuclearization, while lawmakers with the ruling party said that the government needs to take bolder steps to advance the momentum. When asked whether the government is willing to lift its sanctions on North Korea, Foreign Minister KangKyung-wha responded that the government is reviewing that option. The sanctions, called the May 24th measure, were imposed after the North's deadly torpedo attack on a South Korean warship in 2010. The International Monetary Fund is following global financial institutions in downgrading its growth outlook for South Korea. It's cut the growth forecast this year for Korea to 2.8%. Our Ko Ryun-hee has this report.
In its World Economic Outlook report released on Tuesday, the International Monetary Fund forecast South Korea's real GDP would grow by 2.8% this year. That's down 0.2 percentage points from its previous projection earlier in February. For 2019, the IMF expects Korea to grow 2.6%, down 0.3 percentage points from the same period. This comes after other global financial institutions like the OECD and the Asian Development Bank downgraded Korea's growth forecast in September from its previous 3% to within the 2% range. The IMF expects the global economy to grow by 3.7% this year, which is also down from its earlier 3.9% projection. It said the trade spat between the U.S. and China is hurting the global economy, including South Korea. Also, it warned that a rise in U.S. interest rates would accelerate capital flight from emerging markets. An economic expert pointed to several reasons for the downward trend in Korea.
It seems that the main industries like shipbuilding are continuing to face difficulties in South Korea. Also, some government policies like the minimum wage hikes are increasing costs and burdens for companies. Lastly, the global trade war will negatively affect the South Korean economy, which relies heavily on exports.
Meanwhile, economic indicators released by the South Korean government increased concerns about the downturn. Equipment investment in August fell for 6 months in a row, dropping by 1.4% from the previous month. And the number of unemployed people in August hit 1.13 million, which is the highest figure for the month of August since 1999. Although the IMF didn't include specific policy recommendations for South Korea, it did say that countries need to operate monetary policy according to economic conditions and improve productivity through labor market reforms. Ko Ryun-hee, Arirang News.
I'm Devin Whiting, and those are your news headlines.
With U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo back in Washington after completing his 4th visit to Pyongyang, the date and location for the second North Korea-U.S. summit looked set to be revealed in the near future. But while President Trump dished out a few hints on Tuesday, he also revealed that it will not be happening as quickly as some were anticipating. Lee Ji-won has more.
U.S. President Donald Trump says the highly anticipated second North Korea-U.S. summit will happen after the midterm elections on November 6th. Reuters reported on the development on Tuesday as President Trump spoke to reporters on board Air Force One while flying to Iowa for a political rally. With the crunch elections just a matter of weeks away, President Trump told them that he can't just leave now. Earlier at the White House, President Trump also discussed possible sites for the summit. But among the possible locations, Singapore probably isn't going to be one of them.
Well, it is happening, and we're setting that up right now. That was part of the reason that Mike was going over to meet. They're setting up the meeting, and we'll be announcing that probably a different location. Singapore was fantastic, but we'll probably do a different location.
When asked whether his Mar-a-Lago resort in Florida could be a possible location, the U.S. leader said it might be.
He'd probably like that. I'd like that too. I think it would be good, but we'll see. We're talking about 3 or 4 different locations. Timing won't be too far away.
President Trump also touted his very good relationship with Chairman Kim and cited the recent lack of nuclear and missile tests as a sign of progress in the denuclearization process. He added he believes North Korea will be incredibly economically successful if it denuclearizes. This comes as U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo told reporters at the White House on Tuesday that he made real progress on his four-nation tour of Northeast Asia that took him through Japan, North Korea, South Korea, and China. Pompeo said that while there's still much work to be done, Washington can now see a path where they'll achieve the ultimate goal of the full and verified denuclearization of North Korea. 이지원, Arirang News.
For more, we now turn to our Professor Kim Hyun-wook, who's here from the Korea National Diplomatic Academy. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
So President Trump has said that a second summit with Kim Jong-un would happen very soon. But now he said it won't happen until after the U.S. midterm elections on November 6th. Now, there had been much speculation that it would happen before then. So is this a surprise to you at all?
No, not a surprise. I expected that would happen after the midterm election. Because realistically, we don't have much time until midterm election, maybe less than 3 weeks. And still, the Bigun and Choi Sun-hee is about to have a dialogue and working level talk about the denuclearization issues and verification issues. So talk has not been finished, but the midterm is coming, so we don't have time to have the summit meeting before the midterm election. That's first reason. And second speculation I have is that maybe President Trump thinks that there might not be a good outcome of the meeting between Bigun and Choi Sun-hee, and maybe the summit meeting before the midterm election would not be a good idea for him. If the outcome is very good, agreement in the summit meeting, there is something good about the denuclearization issues, maybe he prefers to hold the meeting before the summit meeting. But if he thinks that maybe good, but maybe not good, half-half, he doesn't need to, take a risk on that summit meeting before the midterm election.
But the argument for the holding the meeting before the midterm elections was that Trump would want a second summit because he'd have something to tout for the midterms, and he could boast about it in his rallies in the lead up to the elections as well. But if it comes after the midterm elections, then there's no rush. There could be a potential and a danger that the negotiations could drag out, and that second summit might not happen at all. What are your thoughts on that kind of risk?
Yes, you're right. Having the summit before the midterm election definitely, have some good advantage for President Trump. But having after the midterm election also is good for Trump. I mean, he mentioned several times that he doesn't want to have a time game with North Korea. He wants to be seriously pursuing denuclearization issues. Time would not be the matter for the negotiation. So maybe having the summit after the midterm election, he would like to have a serious negotiation with North Korea. Might be one of the pressures on Kim Jong-un. Okay, just be serious. After the midterm election, having summit meeting, I think that would be kind of burden to Kim Jong-un. That's kind of a negotiation tactic for President Trump, I think.
President Trump has now said, of course, it'll happen after the midterm elections, but he's also hinted at some other details before he revealed that. He said that negotiations for the summit are ongoing and that 3 or 4 locations are being considered, but not Singapore. Later, when he revealed that it was going to happen, the reason that it was going to happen after the midterms, the reason he gave was, if I quote here, "I just can't leave right now." Does that suggest that it won't be happening in the US, do you think?
If the summit's before the midterm election, there's no other alternative but to have the meeting within the United States because of the time limit. But if he holds the meeting after the midterm election, he can choose anywhere, even outside the United States. And if after the midterm election, if the summit is in the United States or Pyongyang, that means that outcome is very good. If they hold a meeting somewhere else, not the United States, not Panmunjom, not Pyongyang, but somewhere in European continent, that means that outcome is not that good. So I think a lot of choices are open, but I think still the choices of the places for summit meeting depends upon what kinds of outcome comes out of the meeting between Big-un and Choi Sun-hee.
So that's interesting. You're saying the location will give us some clues about how negotiations are going between the US and North Korea. That's quite interesting. Well, let's go into the actual details about some of these discussions then. So they're looking, so the US has been looking for various things such as a list of nuclear inventory. The North have been saying, they want other things like the declaration for the end of war. But if you look at some of the specifics that they've got so far, one of the things they said was, the North Koreans will allow inspectors into North Korea to test, to verify the Punggye-ri nuclear test site has been properly destroyed. But we're still waiting for more details. Do you think that can happen soon? But what obstacles are in the way?
I think, Big-un and Choi Sun-hee are talking about that issue, the verification issues. Inspectors go in and take a look at the test site or at Punggye-ri for verifications to gauge the nuclear capabilities of North Korea. For example, checking out the nuclear materials still remaining there. But the thing is that it's not easy to gauge the nuclear level of North Korea because it already have been totally demolished. I think the materials have been out there and would just vanish in the air. So the only way is to go into the test site inside the demolished test site to check out whether there still remains some clues and nuclear materials, which requires a lot of work to break all the rocks there and going into the site in the center and core of the nuclear site, which takes a lot of endeavors and efforts and labor. And I'm not sure if North Korea would allow that far, which would allow the inspectors to know the nuclear level, capabilities level of North Korea. So I think that kind of things, what type of inspection should be done in North Korea, Punggye-ri, and how far the verification issue would be allowed by North Korea. That issue, I think, is talked between Big-un and Choi Sun-hee. And if that's done, I think the inspectors will go into Punggye-ri area, I think.
That's inspectors go into Punggye-ri. The Pompeo has previously said US and IAEA inspectors could be going in there. Well, he said they would be going in there. That's what the US State Department have said. And there are other things as well about the Dongchangli nuclear test site that also will allow international inspectors in to verify that as well. But actually looking at the bigger picture, these kind of looking at Yeongbyon, looking at Dongchangli, how big a concession is this for Kim Jong-un? As in, this very particularly important for the nuclear program or not?
When you look at the Pyongyang agreement, after the summit meeting between North and South Korean leaders, the clear stipulation was that the inspectors would just attend and observe the Dongchangli missile site to be demolished. They didn't specify the verification. They didn't specify which level of inspection should be done at the agreement. So I'm not sure how far North Korea would allow the inspectors to go in, even the Dongchangli missile site area, and that I think would be a very thorny issues. According to which way the North Korea would allow inspectors to do the inspections in North Korea, whether in Dongchangli or whether in Punggye-ri or maybe in the future Yeongbyon facilities, all included, would be the signals of how far North Korea would really be pursuing and developing the denuclearization process. So far, I don't think North Korea has done much to denuclearize itself. I mean, they have, demolished the test site, which is related to the future nuclear capabilities, but has not done much about the nuclear capabilities of the present present time of North Korea. So what U.S. is arguing that, okay, North Korea has to do something about the current nuclear capabilities that it possesses now, and that's something that begins with a very clear verifications, which I think would be on the Punggye-ri and Dongchang-ri issues.
You've mentioned the talks that are supposed to happen between Stephen Biegun, that's the U.S. Special Envoy to North Korea, and Choi Sun-hee, North Korea's Vice Foreign Minister. But there's actually been no details about that revealed yet. Do you think that will happen quite quickly, or do you think this will be another small battle that will take a while for it to actually happen?
I think there should be something going on over there between Choi Sun-hee and Biegun, because in order to have the summit meeting after the midterm election, anyhow there should be some outcome out of the meeting. I'm not sure North Korea would be really willingly accept serious verification by inspectors coming into North Korea, Punggye-ri and Dongchang-ri, but I don't know. Let's see how it goes. Let's see what kind of outcome will come out of it. But the important thing is verification issues. But the important thing is that North Korea is resisting to hold a meeting in Vienna, but somewhere else. If they hold a meeting in Vienna, maybe more and more inspectors and experts would be related to the meeting between Biegun and Choi Sun-hee, and might be a very serious pressure on Choi Sun-hee about the verification issues, which North Korea would not like. So if North Korea does not want to hold it in Vienna, that means that North Korea is not seriously ready to accept the verification by inspectors in IAEA and the United States.
A couple of bit more news to cover before we go as well. So in a surprising move to most of the diplomatic world, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, has announced that she's stepping down in January. Now, she didn't really give a reason why, and speculation is rife. But if we stick to the situation with North Korea, does this change anything? Because obviously she was one of the key people who implemented the strongest sanctions ever on North Korea, negotiating with the other UN Security Council members as well.
The U.S. said clearly several times that the sanction would not be lifted until serious denuclearization of North Korea is complete. So I don't think, Nikki Haley's resigning from the UN ambassador position would be related to the sanction issues. I don't think the U.S. would be lifting sanctions, and I don't think the Nikki Haley resignment would be related to this, sanctioning of the, lifting sanction issues. I think rather it's something related to domestic politics. Maybe Nikki Haley thinks that, okay, now, his portion's done, her portion's done. What she needs to do is to push for the sanctions at the United Nations. But now is the phase for a more serious talk between the United States and North Korea. And maybe Nikki Haley thinks that, okay, my job's done, maybe she needs to work on some other jobs. That might be the reason. Or second, maybe she thinks that after the midterm election, there would be some serious political damage on President Trump, and maybe she thinks that she should be ready for next president election or something like that. So I think it's something more about the domestic politics of the United States rather than North Korea issues.
And finally, South Korea's Blue House has revealed that President Moon will be going to the Vatican later this week, and he'll be relaying a message that Kim Jong-un is very open and very passionately welcome. That's the phrase that they used. That's about Kim having the Pope Francis in North Korea. Now, do you think that could happen?
I think that would happen. Kim Jong-un thinks that, Pope's visit to North Korea would help the entente between North Korea and South Korea, expedited the entente move, exchanges and economic relations between two Koreas. And also that would be a good, move to make Kim Jong-un and North Korea to look like a normal state to the international community. So I think it would be a good game for Kim Jong-un. So yeah, I think it will happen soon. I'm not sure when and which type, because I think Kim Jong-un is also very busy because of his summit meeting scheduled with President Trump. So I don't know when, but I think under the current moves by Kim Jong-un to have a very serious diplomatic moves with a lot of countries and trying to show to the international community the image of normal state. I think he will seriously pursue, Pope's visit to North Korea.
But there's no religious freedom in North Korea. Doesn't that be an issue?
There's no freedom of religion in North Korea, but maybe North Korea would pretend that there is a freedom of religion in North Korea.
Okay, interesting. Well, that's where we'll wrap it up today. Thank you for coming in, as always, and showing us your insights.
Thank you very much.
Now, that concludes our show for today, but do check back same time tomorrow for more analysis of the day's top stories from our experts, and also tune in to our later newscasts for the latest from Korea and around the world. Thank you for watching, and goodbye for now.
If you're on Jeju Island, our FM frequency